Here's a 660 Raptor I'm going to be taking apart. The quad sat, I think she said, for 1.5 years. As you can see, first glance in the fuel tank, it's already, I can just tell it's going to need the carburetors pulled off, which I was going to do anyways. All right, I'm going to tear these down on video just to see how bad they are on the inside. And I'm going to need to use, looks like, actually does not look nearly as bad as I expected it to. Seeing the fuel tank, it's actually looks really damn good. So that's a good sign. So let's, because since I'm going to clean this whole carburetor out, I'm going to screw these in. I'm going to count the turns in. So we got 1, and looks like 1 3/4, 1 and about, I'm going to say 1 3/4 turn in for both of them. When you pull out these needles out of carburetors, you always have to keep in mind there's going to be a spring, a washer, and an O-ring. Sometimes there is 2 washers and an O-ring, so just keep that in mind. There we go. Sometimes they come out attached, sometimes they don't come out attached. So trick to keep these O-ring or this gasket from coming undone is get some grease and press it in there. And that should keep the O-ring or the gasket from falling out, because it'll kind of give it a little bit of a suction cup. Try not to get grease in the fuel bowl or anything like that if you can, because if that gets in a pilot jet or something, it will not like it. It doesn't dissolve in fuel as easy as you think. Like this side was a little bit worse than this side. Let's pop all those jets and stuff out and take the flows out and all that good stuff. I'm gonna try to keep the primary and the secondary sides aligned where they need to be. These ones go into this side, and then these ones go into this side, assuming the carb mouths are facing me. I will be replacing these O-rings because they look like absolute crap, so leave those on there. Well, the jets are clear, so that's a good thing. The emulsion tubes look like they're all right. Typically, you do not need to really mess with the diaphragms. However, I'm going to check them out and make sure there's no rips or anything like that. So I do like to take these carburetors apart, especially if they've been sitting for a long time, and split them. The reason being is because you got O-rings. There's 2 O-rings here and 2 O-rings here. And what I'll do is I'll take these apart and replace those while I'm replacing the O-rings for the needle seats. They use the same O-ring, and I have a whole abundance of those, actually. And you can see somebody's been in here with vice grips or something because they couldn't get it, because these are not Phillips. A lot of people think this is Phillips. This is actually what's called a JIS, which is Japanese industry standard. screwdriver, and I used to have one, but I ended up breaking it. So in this case, we're probably gonna have to use a Phillips head, or if that doesn't work, I'll probably just end up using like whoever previously was in here. Luckily that came loose. You can get away with like a number 3 screwdriver. You just be careful when you're doing it. What I will do is I will take the screwdriver if it's stuck, and I will get a hammer and I will hold the screwdriver like this and force it basically this way, like as if you're trying to loosen it, and smack the end of the screwdriver, and almost every single time it'll pop the screws loose and they will come loose. Hopefully we can get away with just putting some new O-rings in this and cleaning them up, and then it'll be good. These two carbs apart. Oh wait, first I gotta remove this other. There we go. There we go. Another spacer. So now, here is the O-rings I was talking about. This one actually has only one. I was thinking it had 2, but you can see those O-rings are pretty shot. Those need to be replaced, which, like I said, we're going to end up doing after I clean this carburetor up really well. And you can see how grungy that is inside there. Oh yeah, look at that. That's gnarly. Pop these seats out. These will get new O-rings too. Usually you can get these with a small pair of needle nose and they just pop right on out. These O-rings actually don't look as bad as I thought they would. Either way, they're still getting replaced. And always remember too, when you put these things together, there's a screen right there. Put the screen back on. I see a lot of guys putting inline fuel filters and stuff. I mean, you can do that. The tank already has filters on the petcock intake for the reserve and the on position. Plus it's got these little screens. If you have a carburetor, say your bike's running lean on I almost said one cylinder, one side, like say if it's just running lean in general, like a 660 Raptor or whatever, or like the Honda XRs, dual carb bikes, you want to take these out and check them out and see if there's crap clogging it up. And here, as you can see, this is absolutely gnarly. That will cause this carburetor to be very, very lean, and I believe this is the secondary. Will make it run really lean when you try to go wide open throttle or anything like that. So always make sure you got all this clean, very clean. Otherwise you're going to run into issues, mainly at wide open throttle. I can tell somebody else has already had an idea of just going in here and getting a needle nose or something to unscrew that. I'll probably end up just doing that too. Taking this whole assembly apart, it's kind of a nuisance, so we'll just do it kind of the easier way. Not the proper way, but it still is going to work just fine. Oops. There we go, that wasn't too tight. I guess these pliers come in pretty handy a lot of the times. Now, it's about unscrewing that, trying to get the spring, because there's a spring that's under this. It's also going to put pressure against the screw. Sometimes these diaphragms will go bad. They will become stiff, and this one's actually in really, really good condition, which is awesome. But what'll happen is they'll get really stiff and they will not move freely anymore. And basically what they do is they pulse right here against this spring, and the spring returns it back down, and then the intake pulls it back in. Like actually, here's an identical one, an old crappy one. And you can see, look how stiff that is. That is no good. But this one, you can see I can fold that over real nicely. Yeah, it was time to replace those O-rings already. Or anyways, If you look at it closely, it's actually getting, whoops, see, just like that, just cracks right in half. Not good. So best thing to do is just get them replaced. Don't even bother trying to put it back together without replacing these O-rings. See how easy that thing broke? It should be really rubbery and stretchy. Got some new O-rings here. These ones, I don't remember the size of these, but I will measure them for you, so that way if you want, you could probably go to Granger and just get yourself some of these O-rings. Oh, my calipers are dead. To use the old school ones and count. It's funny, I'm so used to using digital calipers. I'm sitting here waiting for this one to show numbers and stuff. 9.5 by 2 by 5. So that's the size of these O-rings. Put that one here. Well, I usually like to use a little bit of assembly lube or whatever kind of oil you want to use. Pretty much any oil will be just fine. Just make sure if it's a high viscosity oil, you don't get it on the inside because it'll cause you issues. And just test fitting to make sure that they're going to go in there nice. You want a nice snug fit in there. You don't want them to be loose. We're gonna put 2 new O-rings on the emulsion tubes and on the float seats. And I always like to put all the old O-rings and whatever old parts I take out and put them off to the side, put them in a baggie or a small box or anything like that to give them back to the customer, so that way they know that they are getting actual new parts. Because that's a lot of times what a lot of guys will do. They'll take apart carburetors or whatever and they'll just clean them, put them together, and then they end up getting it back. So just do it the right way. As simple as that. There we go. Emulsion tubes are going to need new O-rings, which these ones should do the trick, which these ones are 5, let's see, these ones are 5 by 8 by 1.5s for the emulsion tubes. So what I'm going to do now, I want to go through the bowls and just kind of scrape this a little bit in here. That'll be good. So I got that kind of cleaned up. I'm going to blow it out with compressed air. Another thing too you can do to check the gasket to make sure it's good is just take something kind of sharp. I don't know how well the camera's picking that up, but you want to push on it and it should have some rebound to it. Don't ever take them out and stretch them if you plan on reusing them, because you will never get them back in there. Or if they're doing this crap right here like what this one's doing, just take some grease and put it in there. Kind of act like a glue, but without it actually being glue. Getting that all put back in. And then what I'm going to go do is I'm going to go blow these carburetors out with highly compressed air so I can reassemble these. Is it going to fit? Yeah, baby. Oh, man. First thing I will do, I guess I will put this diaphragm in. Make sure it's in the right way first. There we go. I can seat these 2 carburetors together. And I will put this one into this one first. So you gotta put this spring on here, take that little spring out of there first, and then make sure both carburetors are closed. Make sure your thing's not backwards like that. Make sure it's this way. You want to see the screws facing you. And then just carefully make sure you have these O-rings lubed up like I do. So get this pushed on there. You want these to mesh up nicely like that. Now, here's the fun part. What I typically like to do is I will actually run the screws through. Oops. And I will put there we go. I'm just getting snugged. There we go. So those are just snug together now. But double check to make sure your throttle's open, which they do. Now next, what we're gonna do is get this spring in here. And the way I do that is I will open up the throttle and then I will jam it. There we go. So you'll want to push this spring into here. Oops. There we go. You just want to put the spring in like this. Not lose it like I'm doing. Usually a small flathead comes in handy for this. There we go. So you can see that spring is in there now. And now your carburetors are tied together how they're supposed to be. You can see they both move in sync with each other, which is a good thing. Snugging up these screws. Like I said, these are JIS screws. You can get away with a number 3 Phillips on them, and it should work all right. There we go. So now I'm going to put the float seats back in, now that they've got new O-rings on them as well. Make sure they're clean. And you can see they are perfectly clean. The screens are nice and clean and everything. It doesn't matter which one goes where because they are identical. If you do like what I did and you forget to put this back in there, that's actually not a big deal because it's real soft, malleable rubber. You can actually just go ahead and stuff it in there. If you have to heat it up a little bit, you can. But typically, you can just stuff it back in without too much effort. Let's see if I can do it without damaging this. There we go. There. So you can get it back in just like that without too much effort if you accidentally forget to put it in like I just did. I've got the new O-rings in these. And something you don't want to miss on emulsion tubes, I've seen happen quite a bit, is clean these little holes out, because that's where air comes through and catches fuel. So you want to make sure you get those cleaned out. And I keep just specifically for carburetors bread ties. They come in really handy for cleaning out small orifices like this. Is you just take it and you want to strip it until the metal shows, just like that. And then you got a perfect little piece of wire that usually goes through majority of these. I see that's actually a good thing I decided to do this because that one had some stuff in it. I'm going to go blow these out with compressed air too. Screws in, just be careful to chip any of the brass or shove anything that was inside into there. And play the jet nice and clear. I can't remember some look, but I remember there's supposed to be a plug in this. I can look at the diagram real quick. I'm double check that because I could. So there's supposed to be a rubber plug that goes over here, and you know, obviously not choke it on this side. Otherwise, your choke is going to be some weird. Look at that real quick and make sure. Just want to throw a quick tip in here, something to look out for when rebuilding carburetors, or if you're just tearing down a carburetor and checking it out or whatnot. One thing you should check for is on the float needle, you will see there's this little, it's got this little nub in there that's spring loaded that should spring out every time you push it. And as you can see, these ones do, so that's a good thing. I've seen times where they're stuck in, people sit there and they keep adjusting the floats and stuff and they can't get it to stop leaking. That's usually why. Or the gasket, the little seal that's under the seats will go bad too. Another thing you can check for too, submerge your float in water. Watch to see if there's bubbles, because what happens, and I've seen this, is your float right here where the seam is, where basically they're molded together, can form little cracks, and next thing you know, fuel is filling up your float bowl and holding the float bowl down. So carburetor float setting is, you want to be able to hold the carburetor at a 45-degree angle, and then it just starts to rest on the float needle, and then you can see they're spring loaded like I showed before, to look out to make sure they don't have sticking springs. But yeah, you typically want to just check it, make sure, set it at a 45-degree angle, and the floats should sit just like that. Now, it's kind of hard for me to show because where the camera is located. They should sit like that, and they should be able to spring back. I'm going to double check the float setting on these, the float height. But okay, so here's kind of a weird little setup. This is what I do with all carburetors I put back together, is I will hook up my funnel and I will fill up with just a little bit of gas, just enough to put some pressure behind the float seats and such. And I want to make sure that there's nothing leaking out of these before I go putting them in. It's going to save a lot of time and headache having to pull the carburetors all the way back out again once you get them installed, and then you find out that they're leaking. So, yep, see, so sometimes you can see like I've got a little bit of leak right there. Sometimes all it is the float will get stuck. So that right there is an indicator to me that that float needs to actually be raised. So I did have to end up playing with the float height setting a little bit. I found out that they should be set at 13 millimeters. You want to set your carburetors like that. So at a 45-degree angle, till they're just pushing off of the spring pressure of the, so about right there. See, the carburetors are just resting on the springs. I got my caliper set to 13 millimeter. That's just about 13 mil. And then right here, that's just about 13. Let me reset that. So that looks about right. That looks about right. Now, there's nothing wrong with using a impact driver to run screws in, just as long as you're not being a total moron with it. As you can see, I'm taking my time. I've done this 100 times, so just to save time, and then I will go over them like I always do with a 4 millimeter Allen head. Probably wouldn't be a bad idea to torque these, but just to get them snug and they'll be just fine. You don't need to crank on them like hardcore or anything like that. And if you ever need some of these screws, you can go to your hardware stores and you can get the Allen head style or you can get Phillips head style. or if you're a total psychopath, you can go ahead and get yourself some flatheads, because a lot of times they get stripped out because a lot of people don't realize how to take them apart and they just screw them up, no pun intended. But anyways, the size is M4 by 0.7. Air screws back in. Go like this. So you want to do it like this. You'll have your air screw, then you want to put your spring on there, and then you want to do a washer, and then you want to do the O-ring. The O-ring goes on last. And when you do this, put it up like this, and then insert it through the bottom, so that way you don't have any issues like I'm doing now by getting it cocked sideways or anything like that and messing you up when you do it. I can put the carburetors back in, and the bike should be able to be fired up. I won't be doing that tonight though, unfortunately, but in the part 2 of this video I will do it. All right, the carbs are installed. Tomorrow I can test fire it with the funnel wherever I put it, and I'll just put it directly onto the carburetors and start it up and see how it runs, and yeah. Let's see if this thing fires up. Started a lot easier than I expected.